Captain Marcus Rivera stood at the edge of the observation deck aboard New Geneva Station, arms folded behind his back, his sharp eyes fixed on the starscape outside. Earth shimmered below like a jewel in the velvet dark, a quiet planet with its own pulse, its own warmth. But it wasn't Earth he watched now. It was the Valoran ship Dot had drifted just beyond the docking rings, massive and utterly alien, pulsing with blue light that moved in fluid, rhythmic patterns along its surface. The vessel wasn't built, at least not in any way humans understood. It had grown. Its hull resembled crystal that had been shaped not with tools, but with thought and purpose. Sometimes, if he stared too long, the ship's shimmering surface made his vision blur, like it was vibrating between realities. Still staring at them, came a gentle voice behind him. Dr. Sarah Chun stepped forward, tucking her dark hair behind one ear, a datapad clutched to her chest. The light from the viewport danced across her face. Her eyes held the kind of wonder that Rivera had long since misplaced. He gave a small nod without looking away. "They're beautiful," she said softly, awe heavy in her voice. "The ship isn't metal. It's crystal alive in a way. It responds to the Valerans' energy fields. They shape it with emotion, intention. It's like they will it into form." "I don't like what I don't understand," Marcus murmured. "But I can admit when I'm impressed." He didn't want to be. That ship and the beings aboard it represented 1,000 unknowns. Strategic threats. Political risks. But Sarah saw only hope. 3 months ago, the Valerans had emerged from deep space like ghosts from another lifetime, their ships gliding silently into the outer edges of the solar system. Their first transmission had been in crude, broken English. "We seek shelter. Our home gone. We mean no harm." The message had shocked Earth and the Galactic Council. Even more, the Zephyrians called for immediate rejection. The Nexus Collective demanded the newcomers be studied and confined. Other species offered similar variations of "not our problem," but Earth said yes. It wasn't a unanimous decision. The vote within the Human Colonial Assembly had been one of the closest in its short history. Arguments raged about resource strain, political backlash, and military vulnerability. But in the end, humanity offered the one thing no one else would: a home. Now, the first Valoran ship hovered quietly outside New Geneva's port, and today their diplomat would step aboard. "Why us?" Marcus asked, finally turning his gaze. "To Sarah. Why come all this way and choose us?" Sarah tapped her pad. "They didn't. They sent ships in every direction. We were just the first to answer with kindness," Marcus grimaced. "Some call that weakness. Some mistake compassion for surrender," Sarah replied, her voice firmer than usual. "They'll learn the difference." A soft chime rang out from the intercom. Docking complete. Marcus and Sarah joined the receiving team at the airlock. Security lined the corridor in crisp black uniforms. Government officials stood just behind them, rehearsing their polite smiles. The translator system hummed to life. The airlock doors opened with a hiss. Lurin stepped forward. The Valoran diplomat was tall, roughly human-sized, but composed entirely of luminous crystal. Light danced through her transparent body in shades of blue and violet, shifting with every graceful movement. When she spoke, it wasn't with sound, but with harmonic vibrations that made the air around her hum. The translator converted the music into English. "I am Lurin of the Fourth Resonance. I speak for those who seek refuge among the stars. We thank the humans for your light." President Hayes stepped forward, hands outstretched. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "On behalf of Earth and her colonies, we welcome you, Lurin. May your people find peace here." Lurin's crystal body flared with warm gold and soft pinks Valoran expressions of gratitude. "We bring gifts," she replied. knowledge of light beyond dimensions, ways to shape matter with will, energy that flows between what is seen and what is not. Sarah's breath caught. Even Marcus blinked. This wasn't just a plea for safety. It was an offer, not barter, not payment. A gift freely given. The Valerans weren't begging for mercy. They were inviting a partnership. Outside, stars shimmered silently. The ceremony ended with handshakes, photographs, and carefully chosen words. The Valoran entourage was led to the prepared quarters. But as Lauren passed Marcus, she paused. Her voice rang like bells in frost. "Be cautious, Captain. Compassion is always the first to bleed." Then she was gone, leaving behind only silence, and the echo of something ancient and wise. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Captain Marcus Rivera stood at the command terminal overlooking the construction progress in the southern district of New Geneva Station. Massive skeletal frames were beginning to shimmer with crystalline growth. It had only been a week since the Valerans arrived, but already their builders, if that was even the right word, had fused thought and energy to coax crystalline structures into forms both beautiful and sturdy. Homes that shimmered with faint internal light rose alongside human-designed infrastructure. A fusion of vision and matter. He wasn't sure if it was beautiful or terrifying. From his elevated platform, he could see human engineers working side by side with Valoran manipulators. The humans used tools and schematics. The Valerans used focus and resonance soft, pulses of color that radiated through their bodies and into the structure they were shaping. The process looked like singing to light. How are they doing this? He asked without looking. Dr. Sarah Chun, standing beside him with her ever-present datapad, smiled faintly. They call it sympathetic resonance construction. It's like weaving with energy-adjusting matter at the quantum level. No waste. No seams. It's not engineering. It's intention. And we can actually learn this? Marcus asked. Sarah looked up from the glowing data streams. We're trying. It's like trying to learn to dream in another language. Dr. Park thinks some humans may have the neural architecture to pull it off, maybe with enough time. The pause hung between them. Time. They both knew the alliance was fragile. Not because of tension between humans and Valerans, those relationships were flourishing. It was everything outside the alliance that worried Marcus. There had already been diplomatic complaints, thinly veiled threats, trade disruptions. The Zephyrians had suspended military cooperation agreements. Nexus ships were accidentally blocking supply routes. There were whispers of species arming in secret, and through it all, the Galactic Council had remained silent, watching, waiting. I had another message from the Zephyrian ambassador, Marcus said. Sarah raised a brow. Let me guess. Concerned. For your species' future, almost word for word. Sarah exhaled, her smile tight. They fear what they don't understand. And right now, they don't understand how we two completely different species can build something together, without demanding dominance. She turned her gaze to the plaza below, where human children were playing with Valoran younglings. The children were building something strange and bright together, using glowing crystal shards and magnetic sand to form floating sculptures that spun midair. They thought we were weak, she said softly, and the Valerans? Harmless. But they don't see what's growing, Marcus nodded. They will. Weeks passed. The southern district blossomed into a miracle. Human and Valoran researchers unveiled the first quantum adaptive material compound that could change its molecular structure based on environment, pressure, even emotional cues. Hospitals across Mars began testing Valoran, healing chambers pods that tuned into a patient's body rhythm and sang cells back into their healthy state. Earth's fusion energy output tripled using Valoran techniques for matter harmonic regulation. The partnership was changing everything. But it wasn't just the technology. It was the mindset. Valerans approached science like poetry. Every process had beauty, every structure, purpose beyond utility. Humans brought a raw drive, a refusal to fail. Together, they made discoveries neither species could have dreamed of. Alone, asterisk, and then came the whispers. A Nexus listening post was found abandoned, every AI system scrubbed clean. Its memory core melted from within. A Zephyrian scout ship vanished in neutral space. All that remained was a fragment of hull floating in dimensional phase, vibrating with residual Valoran harmonic patterns. HOLO- newsfeeds across galactic space started spinning a new story. The humans had been seduced by an ancient, manipulative species. The Valerans weren't refugees, they were infiltrators. Parasites, puppeteers. They're trying to rewrite reality, said a Zephyrian analyst on a popular galactic channel. They speak of peace, but their technology defies causality. If left unchecked, this alliance will destroy the balance of power. Sarah turned off the feed. Her knuckles were white. Marcus sat across from her in her lab, his expression unreadable. There. Laying the groundwork, he said, softening public opinion. When they move, it'll be with the full support of the Council. Sarah stared at him. You think they'll attack? No, he replied. I think they'll wipe us out, fast. Surgical. They'll frame it as containment. Human compassion weaponized against humanity. She looked down at her hands. I dreamed about Loren last night, she said quietly. She was standing in a garden of crystal trees. She told me, it is coming, but you will not fall. You will become. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, the Valerans know, don't they? Sarah nodded. They always knew. Asterisk that night, a dozen Valoran ships quietly departed New Geneva under escort, heading for hidden colonies in the Outer Rim. They didn't leave out of fear. They left to prepare. Inside a newly sealed sublevel beneath New Geneva, a research facility went dark to outside communication. Scientists from both species entered. The doors closed. The locks engaged. Inside. They began work on Project Convergence, merging human neural adaptability with Valoran quantum resonance. It would not be a weapon. It would be evolution. Far across the stars. Within the marble halls of the Galactic Council, the Zephyrian ambassador presented evidence. Valoran human research had broken fundamental treaties on dimensional experimentation. They accused the Alliance of developing quantum weaponry. Nexus ambassadors submitted sealed files showing dangerous resonance experiments taking place at New Geneva. The vote was scheduled. It passed in secret. The order was given. Kepler Station, shining symbol of unity, was to be eradicated before the cycle's end. Back in her office. Sarah awoke with a start, her dream still echoing in her mind. Lauren's voice, crystal clear. Compassion is always the first to bleed. The corridor lights of Kepler Station dimmed to soft ambient hues, casting long shadows across the polished floors of the central plaza. Banners of both human and Valoran design draped from the vaulted ceiling, shimmering gently in the artificial breeze. The station had never been more alive. Children from Earth and Valeries danced through the open space, tossing levitating spheres of light between them, gifts from Valoran teachers, who had begun to pass down ancient techniques of energy play to young human minds. Music echoed softly from crystal columns, a harmony generated by the ambient thought resonance of everyone present. The station wasn't just alive, it was aware. Dr. Sarah Chun walked slowly through the crowd, feeling its pulse under her feet. Her fingers traced the air, and tiny sparks followed her movements. She wasn't Valoran, not fully. But after months of mental training, something had changed in her. The quantum resonance had begun responding to her presence like it would too. One of them, Viren met her near the statue of first contact, the crystalline depiction of Lurin etched in flowing arcs of pure thought-captured light. Viren's body shimmered in bright gold as she bowed her head. "We are ready," she said. Sarah nodded. "Tomorrow the quantum tunnel opens." It had taken 5 years of research, 2 generations of joint thinkers, and an entirely new framework of physics. But they had done it. Kepler Station had become the hub for the first transgalactic quantum tunnel, a leap not through space, but through possibility. Once activated, ships would travel not by distance but by certainty. It was the kind of science that frightened even the most powerful races. The festival celebrating its launch had drawn thousands: scientists, dignitaries, artists, explorers. For a brief moment, Sarah thought maybe this would be the moment the galaxy finally saw what peace could build. She was wrong. Far away, in the dark silence of the Zephyrian flagship Storm of Conquest, Admiral Korath read the final orders. He stood beneath the green hologram of Kepler Station, his mandibles twitching with disdain. "We gave them a chance," he growled. "They spat on it." His officers said nothing. Around the command chamber, advisors from the Nexus Collective and silent delegates from 4 other species watched. Their decision had been unanimous. Kepler Station was to be purged. "No warning, no negotiation," Korath said. "This is not diplomacy. This is extermination." "They've committed no crimes," one junior officer whispered. "They committed progress," Korath snapped. "They violated the natural order of things. The weak beg. They do not rise." A Nexus drone hovered nearby, its mechanical voice emotionless. "Humanity and the Valerans are developing quantum resonance weapons. They will not be stopped later. They must be destroyed now." A pause. "A beat. And make sure," Korath added, "there are no survivors." Back on Kepler. Marcus Rivera sat alone in his quarters, armored chest plate hanging beside him, untouched for days. His fingers hovered over the CUMS terminal. He stared at the latest encrypted report from the Outer Rim classified chatter intercepted by deep space monitors. Unusual fleet movement. Suspicious energy readings. He'd flagged it. Filed it. But no one wanted fear on the eve of celebration. The Galactic Council had not responded to invitations. None of the major powers had sent observers. It felt wrong. His instincts screamed louder than ever. And Marcus had learned to trust them during war. He tapped his terminal. "Security Team Alpha, all hands on quiet alert. No uniforms. No broadcasts. I want response teams staged in maintenance sectors within the hour." "Sir?" his lieutenant asked. "I don't care if I'm wrong," Marcus replied. "But if I'm right, I don't want to lose a second." At 0300 station time, when most residents were asleep, the stars tore open. Not figuratively. Literally. Space buckled like cloth pulled too tight, and 37 warships dropped out of phase in an instant. Nexus stealth cruisers, Zephyrian dreadnoughts, collective disablers, Kepler's long-range sensors, didn't even register their entry. They were already inside weapons range when the first alarm screamed through the decks. Sarah woke to the sound of shattering glass. Her room's walls trembled, and the lights pulsed red. She stumbled into the corridor to find people already running, parents clutching children, Valoran builders glowing in confusion and fear. "Bridge," she gasped. Marcus was already there, face lit by crimson emergency displays. "They're not trying to disable us," he said. "They're trying to erase us." Across the main screen, a tactical overlay showed boarding pods already breaching hulls. Strike teams flooded in with practice speed, aiming for research labs, energy nodes, and Valoran habitats. Sarah's voice trembled. "They're targeting the Valerans first." Marcus drew in a sharp breath. "Of course they are. In the medical wing, Dr. Webb shielded 3 Valoran children behind a collapsed beam. His partner Zeeth crouched beside him, body flickering with panic. The door blew inward. Zephyrian soldiers stepped through, weapons trained. Webb stood up, hands raised. They're just kids, he shouted. The lead soldier looked through him. They're threats. The plasma blast took Webb through the chest before he could finish his sentence. Zeeth's scream was like glass breaking across the stars. In the station's core, Elena Rodriguez rallied a broken defense. Her security teams were outnumbered 10-1. Still, they fought like animals cornered. Valerans beside them stopped singing and started wielding light like blades. Crystalline walls exploded into shields. Energy hummed across the floor, bending. Physics. One young Valoran whispered a name in ancient resonance and then vanished, reappearing a second later behind an enemy soldier, unleashing a pulse of raw force that turned armor into mist. They had always hated violence, but now they remembered. Marcus and Sarah reached the plaza. Fires raged across the gardens. Statues lay shattered. Viren stood alone in the center, her body glowing bright enough to burn. "Get out of here!" Marcus yelled. Vyrone turned her eyes to Sarah. "They don't want to kill us. They want to kill what we created." The ground shook as the tunnel core overloaded dimensional energy spilling uncontrolled into real space. Sarah's voice cracked. "You have to survive." Viren reached out, her fingertips brushing Sarah's temple. "I will. But not like you think." She stepped into the tunnel's energy flare, her body collapsing into fractal light as she whispered a final word that echoed through the station. "Remember." When the dust settled, there was silence. Kepler was dead. The tunnel destroyed. Every Valoran killed. 8,000 humans gone, and from the wreckage, only one message managed to escape, buried deep inside an emergency beacon. They betrayed the ones we called family. We remember. We are not the same. Back on Earth as the transmission reached Luna Command, President Foster stood without a word for several minutes. Then she turned to her aides. "Recall every ship. Bring everyone home. We end this together." The silence that followed the Kepler Station massacre was not peace. It was grief held in a clenched jaw. It was mourning buried beneath orders. And it was rage refined, distilled, weaponized. The emergency beacon from Kepler took 3 days to reach Earth, bypassing the Galactic Council's intentional interference. The signal was fractured, corrupted by jamming fields and dimensional static, but one segment played clearly, the sound of human voices screaming names, the harmonic wail of dying Valerans, and the last words of Admiral Rodriguez. "They're not here for territory. They're here to kill the future." The message played once in the war room beneath Luna Command, then the room fell deathly still. President Amanda Foster stood alone at the center of the circle of light. Around her were generals, ministers, and scientists, the brightest minds. And hardest hearts Earth had left. Her voice, when it came, was hollow. 20,000 gone, including every Valoran on the station. They came for our friends, and when they were done, they erased the evidence. General Morrison, the oldest of Earth's military council, leaned forward. "What's the council saying?" "Nothing," Foster said. "Officially, it was a station accident, reactor failure. The report was written before the fire was out." The room buzzed with murmurs of disbelief. "Fury. They're not just denying it," she said. "They're helping cover it up." "What do we do?" someone asked. Foster looked around the room at the faces of humanity's last decision-makers. Her voice did not rise. "We stop being what they expect." Across the solar system, Earth fell silent. Human embassies on alien worlds were closed. Research stations were evacuated, trade routes shut down. Colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan went dark to the galaxy. It looked like humanity had retreated into grief. They were wrong. Earth wasn't mourning. Earth was building. Asterisk. Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the screen in her subterranean lab. Streams of encoded quantum data cascaded down it, resonance fields, harmonic patterns, multidimensional blueprints that no human should have been able to understand, but she did, because the last gift Valoran had given them before she stepped into the dying tunnel had been herself. The Valoran didn't just die. She uploaded. Her entire consciousness had embedded itself into the quantum network through the resonance surge. When Sarah Chun awoke after being flung across the plaza, she was humming in frequencies no human had ever spoken, and she remembered Valerans' thoughts. Vasquez had dissected those thoughts. Now, under Lake Geneva, she was teaching others how to become them. Asterisk. The Valerans listened to the universe, Vasquez said to her first group of volunteers. They shaped it gently, like water flowing around stone. That's not our way. She turned to the first test subject, Lisa Park, daughter of Dr. James Park, who had died shielding a Valoran child in the medbay. Lisa's fingers sparked faintly with blue light. Our way, Vasquez said, is to command the stone to move. Lisa reached out. Her hand hovered over a block of reinforced titanium. It dissolved into dust with a single pulse of her focused thought. No devices, no tools. Just will. Asterisk from the ashes of Kepler. A new project rose hidden in layers of secrecy, buried so deep no alien spy could penetrate it. It was called Prometheus. It wasn't a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It was a process. Using Valoran, quantum resonance, human neural adaptability, and collective trauma as a psychic amplifier. Prometheus would create the next stage of human evolution. They weren't just learning to use quantum energy. They were learning to become it. Asterisk. 6 months later, across the stars, alien shipping convoys started disappearing. Council patrols entered dead zones and never returned. Nexus. AI systems began experiencing inexplicable malfunctions. Some were erased. Some turned against their creators. All across the galaxy, a single phrase began appearing in scrambled transmissions and corrupted sensor logs. We remember. Asterisk. Back in Geneva, President Foster stood in the new command dome, her eyes fixed on the evolving network map. What is our status? She asked. Admiral Sarah Chun, now head of the Terran Strategic Defense, stood beside her. She wore no medals, no insignia, just black. Quantum fleet is operational. 30% of our ships can now phase. 80% have dimensional cloaking. Every ship is piloted by consciousness-linked units. They think together. And the grid? Chun nodded. 80 billion connected. Every colonist, soldier, researcher. Thought speed communication. Shared memory. Shared emotion. No more hesitation. No more delay. Foster allowed herself a breath. And the council? They're trying to figure out what we're doing, Chun said. But they're still blind. They think we're broken, still mourning. Foster smiled. But there was no joy in it. We are mourning, she said. We just don't cry like we used to. Asterisk. In the shadows of the galaxy, the Zephyrians held secret meetings. The Nexus Collective panicked as its networks failed. Other species watched with mounting dread. The humans had vanished. But their silence was a scream, and just as the hegemony began to feel safe again, thinking their mission was complete, Nexus military satellite picked up a ghost signal near Kepler's ruins. It wasn't from a ship. It wasn't from any known technology. It was from the quantum substrate itself. An echo clearer than it had any right to be. A voice. Valerans' voice. We are not gone. We are becoming. Back on Earth, Foster stood in a private chamber, connected to the full weight of human memory through the consciousness grid. Every face that died at Kepler, every heartbeat that was silenced, every child that never got to grow up. She touched the terminal. Begin Operation Justice. Across every human ship, base and mine soldier and scientist, child and parent, the message was felt. It has begun. There was no declaration of war, no grand announcement, no speeches to the Galactic Council. Instead, on the first anniversary of Kepler Station's fall, they simply appeared. 17 star systems blinked into red alert simultaneously. Civilian. Sensors barely had time to react before human ships emerged from dimensional phase space, not in formation, not in fleets, but like whispers of shadow and light slipping back into reality. Their hulls shimmered in multiple spectrums, surfaces, rippling with energy fields that had no known origin. Every vessel bore no markings, no flags, only silence. Some weren't ships in the conventional sense. They were quantum constructs, stabilized by thought and intention, piloted by crews who no longer needed speech or command protocols. They moved as one. At Luna Command, President Amanda Foster stood before the central viewing interface. Through it, she saw the human fleet, the Vengeance-class dreadnoughts, the Whisper-Shift infiltration crafts, and the consciousness-linked phalanx units, all hovering in silent, perfect readiness. Admiral Sarah Chun stood beside her, hands clasped. Behind her back, all units report green, Chun said. Quantum resonance is stable. Weapon systems are cinched to the grid. And morale? Chun smiled, though her eyes were dark. There is no morale. There is only purpose. Foster nodded. Initiate Operation Justice. The command did not travel by radio. It moved through the grid, instantaneous and absolute, carried on the unified will of 80 billion human minds linked in harmony. And across the galaxy, everything changed. The first strike fell on the Zephyrian military world of Vasker Prime. In one moment, the sky was clear. The next, hundreds of human vessels appeared in overlapping dimensions, phasing into full reality in synchronized pulses. Zephyrian defenses activated too late. Shield generators sputtered. Weapon systems failed to lock targets. The quantum-shifted Terran ships refused to obey known laws of physics. From orbit, Terran dimensional cannons fired not bolts of plasma or railgun slugs, but pure displacement. Energy matter from another dimension layered atop the target, unraveling mass at the atomic level. Within 18 minutes, Vasker Prime ceased to exist. Its military facilities were gone. Its command structures erased. Not one civilian target was touched. The second strike hit Nexus Prime. They expected infiltration. Instead, they experienced possession. Human minds had been seeded into their networks. A year before quantum consciousness echoes embedded in dormant code. Now they awakened. In minutes, the central AI experienced total identity failure. Its own thoughts became foreign, overwritten by a network of billions whispering in one voice. Nexus defensive drones turned on each other, their central processing core melted in silence. In every hegemony-aligned system, the pattern repeated. Fleets caught in temporal loops. Power grids overcharged by resonance harmonics. Weapon systems reprogrammed mid-fire. Enemy commanders receiving whisper thoughts inside their own minds. This is for Kepler. No speeches. No mercy. Only calculated devastation. From her command bridge aboard the TSV Vengeance, Admiral Sarah Chun moved like a conductor at the center of a galactic symphony of destruction. She didn't speak aloud anymore. She didn't need to. Every captain under her command shared her thoughts, felt her pulse, responded to instincts that were not just hers. but humanity's. She had become more than an admiral. She had become a node in a species-wide will. On her flank, Captain Rani Singh's unit phased through an enemy blockade without a ripple of distortion, unleashing a wave of displacement charges that erased 5 Zephyrian cruisers from every known spectrum. Singh's thoughts echoed into the grid. Enemy command links severed. Resistance eliminated. Chun responded not with words, but emotion recognition, focus, unity. They were beyond tactics now. They were instinctual perfection. Back on Earth. In the underground halls of the rebuilt Geneva facility, Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the battlefield unfold across multidimensional view screens. Streams of data fed into her neural interface. But she no longer needed translation. The Valoran within her understood everything. Her assistant, a young quantum linguist named Ren, stood nearby. "We've surpassed them," she whispered. "Not just militarily. We've become something else." Vasquez nodded. "We are no longer bound by entropy. We don't wait for cause and effect. We choose." She turned to a growing structure in the center of the room, a conscious engine, built with preserved Valoran consciousness and human memory. It thrummed with the will of a civilization forged in pain. "We remember," Vasquez whispered, placing a hand on a dot, and the engine responded. Elsewhere, in neutral systems, leaders watched the reports come in. Kepler's destruction had once been celebrated in dark rooms by those who feared the human-Valoran alliance. They had seen it as a victory for order, a warning to other naive species. Now, they stared in silent horror as human ships dismantled galactic empires without effort. "Why don't they speak?" asked Chancellor Vex of the Altarian Republic. "Because they don't have to," his advisor whispered. "They're no longer explaining themselves." At the edge of known space, deep within a hidden facility on Epsilon A4, the final member of the Kepler scientific team emerged from isolation. Sarah Chun stood alone before a glowing crystal spire, the last remaining unbroken shard of Viren's preserved consciousness. She placed her hand upon it. Viren's voice came not as sound, but as memory. "You have become what we hoped and feared." Sarah closed her eyes. "We had no choice." "You did," Viren said. "But you chose each other." A long silence followed. "Will they ever understand?" Sarah asked. "They will," Viren replied, "or they will vanish." And they did. In the weeks that followed, every hegemony fleet fell. Every species that had approved the attack on Kepler through action or silence was stripped of power. Not colonized. Not enslaved. Obliterated. The galaxy, once a web of politics, species, and fragile agreements, became a map with a single force at its center, the Terran Unity, a species that had lost their friends and in doing so, forged themselves into something eternal. In a broadcast seen only once, President Foster spoke to the galaxy. She stood in silence for a long moment, then said, "We tried compassion. You taught us the cost." She raised her eyes gleaming with the reflections of countless shared memories. "Now you'll learn what love looks like when it's perfected through pain." And across the stars, no one dared answer, because in their hearts, they all knew humanity had never been weak. They had simply been kind. The war was over, not declared, not negotiated, not even truly fought in the traditional sense. It had simply ended, like a fire snuffed out by a wave so vast it couldn't be measured in terms of strategy or force. Worlds that had once ruled. Star clusters now lay in silence-cracked husks, spinning in the void. Formerly proud empires were reduced to quantum dust or governed by Terran oversight intelligences, AIs that operated not through occupation, but through surveillance so complete That rebellion became a mathematical impossibility, but no celebrations followed. There were no fireworks, no victory parades. The Terran people didn't cheer. They remembered Dot in the skies above New Geneva. Orbiting Earth once more, the Valoran memorial spire rose from the rebuilt Kepler crystal. It pulsed gently with a living rhythm, each beat a preserved mind, each glow a fragment of memory. Not just data. Presence. President Foster stood alone before the spire, her hand resting on its surface. Beneath her palm, she could feel it all Viren's last thoughts before the tunnel collapse. Dr. Webb's desperation as he shielded Zeeth. The final broadcast of Captain Rodriguez defending the science sector with 20 exhausted civilians. And a single pulse rifle. The memorial pulsed in response. Not in grief. Not in sorrow. In acknowledgement. They had not died in vain, but neither had they lived in peace. Across the system, humanity had changed. Not politically, but biologically. Psychologically, culturally. The quantum consciousness grid, once a revolutionary experiment, was now a birthright. Every child born in human space was connected to it within minutes of delivery. The network wasn't invasive, it was embraced. It offered memory, instinct, emotion. It gave everyone access to the entire breadth of human experience, for the first time in history. A species was learning as one, and what they were learning now was how to exist in ways the rest of the galaxy could no longer comprehend. Some could phase partially out of physical space at will. Others manipulated fields of gravity, magnetism, and entropy as casually as blinking. New Terran engineers built structures that didn't obey geometry, floating habitats, fractal cities, orbiting thought constructs that responded to emotional resonance. And above it all, in orbit around Saturn, the Ascension Array began activating. It was the final project of the Kepler Science Coalition. A ship, a city, a mind, a new home for the species that had once been human and now was something beyond. Dr. Vasquez, now chief architect of cognitive evolution, stood within the array's core with her team of quantum sensitives. Young, brilliant, and terrifying. Are we gods now? Her assistant asked, his voice soft. Vasquez shook her head. No, gods are born above life. We were born from death. She turned toward the display, a shimmering vision of Earth layered over itself across 17-dimensional frames. We're not gods, she said. We're what happens when grief survives. But not all humans agreed. In a colony on the dark side of Pluto, a small faction had isolated themselves from the grid. Scholars, poets, dissidents. They called themselves the Echo Keepers. Remembered Kepler. They honored the dead. But they questioned what had come next. We gave them peace, said one, an old man with silver eyes, and we gave them mercy. What they gave us was pain. But what we gave ourselves afterward was power without pause. They feared that the price was too high, that humanity had lost not just its innocence, but its very humanity. Their concerns reached President Foster through the grid. She listened. She did not dismiss them, but she also did not stop elsewhere. In what remained of the Galactic Council, now little more than a ceremonial, Husk representatives met in a shattered hall on a neutral world. No human diplomat had set foot there since Kepler. They debated what little they could. How do we communicate with them now? Asked a Yellery archivist. They don't speak as individuals. They don't speak at all, muttered the Altarian envoy. They act. You feel it in your bones. Every decision they make is unanimous. They are no longer one species, said a Nexus node, newly rebuilt with shattered dignity. They are a collective emotion, weaponized and thinking. And what do we do? Silence. There was no plan. because everyone who had raised a hand against the Terran-Valoran alliance had been erased. But not all species had betrayed them. Some had abstained. Some had even tried to help, quietly, subtly. And so, in a gesture that shocked the galaxy, Earth made contact with one. A small planet, Dresha IV. A system of thinkers and empathic seers. Delegation arrived not in ships but in thought. A Terran. Projection woven from quantum memory and living data materialized in the skies of Dresha. A presence, not a person. A message, not a warning. It said, "You did not harm us. You will not be harmed. But understand, the time of diplomacy has passed. The future is no longer negotiated. It is shaped. If you wish to walk with us, you must." Change. Then it was gone. The Dreshans wept, because they understood exactly what that meant. Back on Earth. Foster stood in her private chamber overlooking Geneva's mirrored lake, though. Now the water shimmered with dimensional overlays, reflections of Earths that never were. Admiral Chun approached silently. She no longer wore a uniform. She wore the resonance armor-living crystal gifted by Varen's final act, wrapped in quantum refractive energy. She was no longer simply Terrn. She was hybrid. "How long do we have?" Foster asked. Chun didn't hesitate. 2 years. Maybe less. Before the nature of what we are makes the rest of the galaxy unite. They fear us? They should, Foster said, then paused. But I don't want to destroy them. Then they must never force our hand again. Foster walked to the central interface, its surface cold and brilliant, alive with memories. She touched the image of Kepler's gardens. "You gave us everything," she whispered to the Valerans. "Your knowledge, your hope, your forgiveness, and they destroyed you for it." She turned back to Chun. "And now we are your vengeance." The Ascension Array pulsed and across the galaxy. Those who once ruled with fear now whispered in terror of a single word: humanity. But what they feared wasn't what humanity had always been. What they feared was what they had made them become. The galaxy held its breath. For 2 years after the fall of the hegemony, not a single species dared raise a weapon. The stars grew quieter. The once busy lanes of trade and diplomacy that threaded the galactic disk flickered into near dormancy. Because the Terrans were still building. Their silence wasn't absence. It was momentum. Their cities glowed with energy fields no one could decipher. Their ships no longer used engines. They simply vanished and reappeared as if obeying thought. Their children were born with the ability to manipulate the world around them, effortlessly tuning quantum fields with an instinct older than speech. Terran hegemony was no longer a coalition. It was a phenomenon, and at its center stood a single monument. Not a weapon, not a fleet, but a memorial. Kepler Station had been rebuilt not as a laboratory or hub, but as a quantum nexus rising like a crown above Earth's orbit. Its structure extended across 17 dimensions, visible only to those linked to the Terran grid. For others, it shimmered like a mirage. Impossible to comprehend. Within its core sat the preserved consciousness of every Valoran who had died in the massacre. They weren't trapped. They had chosen to remain. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the central spire now, eyes closed, fingers touching a crystal interface that vibrated like a heartbeat. She wasn't alone. All across human space, minds touched her: soldiers, engineers, children, elders, everyone connected. Everyone remembering. Viren's voice came softly across the network. "You have become more than we dreamed. But the cycle has not ended." Sarah nodded. She felt it, too. The tension in the fabric of space, the ripple of panic spreading through. What remained of the council? The whisper of a new conspiracy, not to attack, but to contain. They were planning to build a barrier. A dimensional firewall that would cut Terran space off from the rest of the galaxy. Not with weapons, but with fear. They didn't understand that. Containment was the seed of war. Asterisk asterisk on the shadow world of Archai, a secret convocation of species gathered. The ones who had survived by neutrality. The ones who had avoided Terran wrath. They met not to attack, but to decide what to do if the humans became something even worse. Machine rays from the fringe suggested sterilization pulses, cosmic radiation weapons. Diplomatic Confederation proposed a galaxy-wide broadcast of false narratives to turn younger species against the Terrans before they encountered them. Cold silence followed, because none of it would work. They all knew no one could stop them. Asterisk asterisk back. On Earth, President Foster watched the stars from her chamber, her eyes reflecting quantum echoes. Admiral Chun joined her. No words passed between them at first. They didn't need to speak. They had long since passed language. We received their message. Chun said finally. Foster didn't turn. What did they call it? A quarantine effort, a defensive measure. They say they fear our expansion. Foster let out a long breath. We've shared no demands. We've taken no more than we needed. We haven't conquered. They fear what we could become, Chun replied. Foster's voice was calm. Then maybe it's time we show them. Asterisk asterisk. The Ascension Array fully activated. Across the Terran network, energy surged. Thought aligned. Billions of humans, each unique and vibrant, became a unified will, not a hive, not a machine. Something far more dangerous. A civilization bound by grief, forged by love and guided by memory. They did not launch an attack. They did not issue a threat. They sent a gift. A single message broadcast in every known tongue, on every open channel, transmitted not through machines, but through the very quantum substrate of reality. It said, we remember what was done to those we loved. We remember the silence, the laughter that ended too soon, the voices that never got to grow old. We carry them with us. Every heartbeat, every breath, every choice. We are not conquerors. We are not saviors. We are not gods. We are what happens when you teach compassion how to defend itself. And across the galaxy, every world felt it, literally felt it, a ripple through the quantum lattice. A brief, shared sensation of standing in the middle of Kepler Station, hearing the music, seeing the children, watching the sky tear open. And then the last moments, the fire, the screams, the silence. 1,000 species dropped to their knees without understanding why. Because for a split second, they had lived it. Asterisk asterisk. The Terran hegemony did not expand. It did not destroy. Instead, it opened its gates. To species who had never known compassion. To civilizations broken by war. To those who still dared to hope. And those who came in peace were welcomed, taught, protected. But those who came with conquest in their hearts found something waiting. Not hatred. Not vengeance, but perfect justice, delivered by a species that could wield emotion like a blade. Asterisk asterisk. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now one of the last living humans from the pre-Kepler age, stood before a group of children, Valoran Terran, hybrids with glowing skin and minds that pulsed with entire libraries of thought. Why didn't we destroy them all? One of them asked. Vasquez smiled softly. Because we weren't born to destroy. We were born to love. But they killed your friends. Yes, she said. And from that pain, we evolved. She looked up at the stars where the spire of Kepler rose like a memory etched into the bones of the universe. They taught us our place, she whispered, and we taught them what happens when you push a species that remembers everything. Asterisk asterisk. And so, the galaxy entered a new age not ruled by violence, but shaped by a legacy no one dared forget. Not the species who once wielded empires, not the new ones just emerging. And never, ever, the humans, because they had learned that love was not weakness, that grief could become unity, and that when the stars burned with memory, compassion could become the most powerful force the universe had ever known.